if you stick with something you love, in fact, I've told my children, it's not about the money. It's because you're going to spend an awful lot of your time in your job, and you better find something you love. And I did, and so I was blessed, and so I got rewarded in the long run. It was a great run for me, and I loved extension. I still love extension.
You can get paid and be successful and get paid well at anything if you work hard and you enjoy it, and you won't work hard if you don't enjoy it.
I think you have to be able to write. I think you have to be able to speak, and you have to have communication skills. I think that's probably the most important thing to have success in extension.
I think that's something you have to have for almost a success in anything, is to be able to communicate. And I think that's why so many of my guests that come on are teachers, not trained teachers that went to school, but they're able to communicate and tell people what they are doing and build off of that and train people to do stuff around them.
Well, and my motto is kindness matters. I think we've lost that today.
Oh, really?
I really think, it doesn't cost you anything to be nice. I think that
I wish people would read their emails before they send them out. If you want to be frustrated and write a dirty email, that's fine, but erase it before you send it.
Well, for years, we talked about this in my Sunday school class. When I get mad, which doesn't happen very often, but when I get mad, I write a letter to that person. I don't send it, but I write it. And as soon as I get it out, it's like it's cathartic. Now, there are times when I do send something a day or two later, but I have rewritten that letter into a much kinder, gentler tone.
What's the difference between agriculture and horticulture?
Horticulture is a division of agriculture. And I would always say that in Arkansas, probably horticulture is the stepchild to agriculture, because if you think we're a very agricultural state, but if you we're rice and soybeans and cotton and then wheat, and then you've got livestock and poultry, and horticulture was the fluff, the ornamentals, which was more my major, and vegetables and stuff. And we don't have huge commercial production of fruits and vegetables in Arkansas. We used to have more commercial production. Now, I would say when you look at commercial production of the fruits and vegetables, you're looking still smaller acreage. You're doing things for local markets. You've got the farmers markets, that type of thing. But I do think the sustainable divisions of horticulture are still more popular. There's a lot of young people today that want to save the world, and that's a great way to go into that for that very reason.
You're not from Arkansas?
No, I moved here.
Well, then how come you wanted to live in Little Rock?
I moved here when I was in high school and absolutely hated it. I came from St. Louis. I was in 10th grade. All my friends were getting cars. I had a boyfriend back there, and I moved here to where I didn't know anybody. And we moved my entire childhood. My dad was at the telephone company. We moved every 2 to 3 years. And it never bothered me because I'm somewhat outgoing. I can talk to a wall. But when you got in high school, that's a little bit, I hated it. And all I said to my dad was, as soon as I'm out of high school, I'm going back to Missouri and I'm going to Mizzou, and I'm never staying here. And then by the senior year of high school, things started clicking. I visited colleges all over. My sister went to Baylor, and I looked at that, but they didn't have horticulture. They had botany, but they didn't have horticulture. And I looked at Southwestern, and they didn't have horticulture, and I went to Fayette, and I loved it. And now I am the biggest proponent of Little Rock that there is. I think Arkansas is one of the best kept secrets, and Little Rock even more. So I wouldn't live anywhere else.
Let's talk about the Master Gardener program that you started. You had only been at the Cooperative Extension offices for 5 years when you went to Tulsa.
Right. We went, and actually the program, the Master Gardener program, started back in 1972 in Washington State. And the gentleman who founded it is still living, and he still travels around and talks to groups. But he was in a county extension office, and they were getting a ton of consumer horticulture calls. And he said, we need some help. And so he said, I think we can train some good volunteers to help us out. And his boss said,
help us do what? Answer the phone?
Answer the phones and help do community service and outreach. And his boss has said, oh, it'll never work. And here we are, this many years later, and now it's in every state in the United States. There's one state that it's not through the Land Grant College, but every other state it's through the Land Grant College. Massachusetts, it's through a botanical garden, but it's also in provinces in Canada and now South Korea as well.
Wow.
So Tulsa had a program. Oklahoma did not have a program, but Tulsa had a program. And so 4 of us went over to visit to see if it was something that would be feasible.
When you were in your 20s?
I was actually 28, I guess, when we went over there and looked. And 'cause I was 30 when we started it. And we went over there and we decided it would work. We came back and we kind of put together the book, borrowed bits and pieces from other states, and we offered the class in 1988 for 4 counties. It was Pulaski, Saline, Jefferson, and Garland County.
You put together a book, like an educational book?
They get a huge notebook, but we borrowed from other states and put it together to get it done as quickly as we did. And so we had them out at the 4-H Center. We charged them only $25 to take the class. And so each of our 4 counties was supposed to take 10 people. Well, I put something in the newspaper in my column. 78 people applied for that first class for Pulaski County. So they let me take 20 people instead of 10. Everybody else, and some of them didn't even get their 10. So we had about 45 people that took that original class back in 1988. And then after that, we started having our program in Pulaski County by itself. The second year, I had 150 apply. I mean, it was really, really rocking. I mean, people would send in resumes with their application and references of who I could call that could let me know they're a great gardener. And, I didn't care if they were a great gardener. You can teach people horticulture. What was most important for me when I interviewed people to see if they understood what they were getting into was the volunteer commitment, because that was what I was building, was a volunteer base. And it was all about, I didn't want them to just come in. The carrot was the education.
Yeah.
But if all they wanted was the education and they weren't planning to pay back any volunteer service, that really wasn't a good investment for me.
And the volunteer piece that you wanted and that the original man who started the program wanted was because you need people to go out into the field and look at stuff. You need people to answer the phones. You need people to go out in the field and...
Well, each county actually bases it on their needs. We have 75 counties in Arkansas, 67 have the program. And each county is going to be different based on their population, the calls that come in. When I started in Pulaski County in 1980, there were 5 ag agents. And so each of us had a phone day. Even though I was the horticulture agent, we had another gentleman who was a commercial horticulture agent, but I was any kind of horticulture. And so we each had a day on the phone. Well, over time, people started retiring, but Extension started downsizing. So from 1980 to 1992, we went from 5 ag agents to 2. Phone calls did not stop. And, I couldn't get anything done if I was in the office. My record was 158 calls in one day. And, people brought plant samples in for identification for diseases or insects, and it was just overwhelming. So in Pulaski County, and we were the only county that mandated this, but to begin with, you have to pay back 40 hours of volunteer service in a year, which is not hard.
And that's mostly phone work. Then.
Well, and for us, 20 of those 40 had to be answering the phone. So we had a horticulture hotline on Thursdays and Fridays. Mm-hmm. And so, but we only had 20 people. So, and we only did it during the gardening season. So late March to early September, mid-October, we would cut it off. But now they have people in the office every day helping.
How long does it take to become a master gardener?
It's a 40-hour class, so it's usually 5 weeks. Now, we did offer, and we started something new 2 years ago, so this coming January will be the 3rd year, is an online class, so that people who work or can't take off during the day to come to a 40-hour class can actually do it at their own pace, and they have 3 months to do it. So it starts January 1st, or January 2nd, and then it ends March 31st.
People that work will be hard to come man the phone and do volunteer hours.
Well, but it's not mandated to do the phone anymore. They have so many projects. Pulaski County alone has over 500 Master Gardener volunteers now. So they have 25 projects across the county.
And so some of them are taking care of
a lot of them are doing
public gardens.
Well, there's things like there's plant therapy programs at Baptist Rehab Hospital.
Oh, really?
There are school gardens. There's a community garden out at the 4-H Center that's a demonstration garden that they're going to use it with the 4-H kids. They're teaching them how to, how they have beehives, they have compost bins, they have vegetables and flowers and fruit. The old State House was the original project in Little Rock, and it's still a Master Gardener project today. We also used to have a vegetable garden at the zoo. That was our second project in Arkansas. When we had some interesting pest problems, we had wallabies that would get loose and come eat our vegetables. But the produce that we grew actually was used to feed the animals at the zoo.
And then the governor's mansion.
The governor's mansion, they'd have the herb garden, vegetable garden there as well. So there's lots of the old mill in North Little Rock, the community center in Jacksonville. So they try to have a project in all parts of the counties that they're in.
What do you get the most asked about in Arkansas? Pests, fertilizers?
I would say the number one question is pruning, and the number one plant pruning is pruning crepe myrtles. And the funny thing, I did the radio show for 28 years at the call-in show on Saturdays, and this lady called in, and a lot of the calls were the same every week. It would be something similar or very seasonal or cyclic. And so this lady called in and she said, I've been listening to you since you were Janet Bierman, so before I got married. And she said, but I have never heard this question. So we were thinking, here comes a doozy. And she said, when do you prune crepe myrtles? Which was the number one question. And Russ, we all fell out because, everybody knew the answer to that. My husband, who is not a gardener, could tell you how to prune a crepe myrtle. But it really made me realize that until it's your question, you don't listen to the answer. You may be listening to the radio show and listening to those things and reading my columns, but you just kind of read it until it pertains to you.
So you can be as repetitious as you want to be.
Well, they say you have to repeat things 3 times before it really sinks in. But again, if you don't have a crepe myrtle, why are you paying attention? Mm-hmm. It's in general information. Mm-hmm. But once you have one, then all of a sudden, it's important.
Number one mistake home gardeners make?
Probably overdoing.
Just what you said.
Yeah, too much of anything.
I absolutely am guilty of that.
Well, and fertilizer. One of my favorite stories, some good friends of my parents, they're long gone, but he retired before his wife did, and she had always fertilized the yard, and he thought he would surprise her, and he found these bags of ammonium nitrate, which no home gardener should ever use. But he saw them in the garage, and he thought, I'm going to surprise her. And he took all those bags of fertilizer and dumped them on the yard. It looked like it had snowed. Everything died.
Oh my
plants
gosh.
don't get fat, they burn up. And so I think, common sense should come in a little bit too. But and make sure you have separate sprayers for insecticides and fungicides and herbicides if you're going to use them.
I think everybody prunes wrong.
Oh, and pruning is, if you said, I'm going to have a talk on pruning or I'm going to have a talk on flowers, everybody's going to go to the flowers. But everybody needs the pruning because
they prune
hard.
the flowers away.
Well, if you prune at the wrong time, you're usually not going to kill the plant, but you might lose the reason you planted it, the flowers.
You might lose the reason you planted it. Husband Grady, are you listening now? Because he always wants to prune when it's starting to really grow and get really big. He wants to go out there and prune it, and I'm like, it's doing its thing right now. You can't prune now.
Well, he could have been one of my callers. Years ago, this gentleman called on the radio show, and he said, Janet, my wife's favorite flowers are hydrangeas. And he said for her birthday or anniversary or something years ago, I planted a whole row of them. He said they have never bloomed. And he said all the neighbors bloom, but ours don't. And he said, if you can't tell me how to make them bloom, I'm taking them out. I said, when do you prune them? He said, I cut those dead sticks to the ground every winter. Ooh. Well, they have the flowers already in them. I said, don't prune them this year, and you'll have flowers.
When do you prune them?
Well, if they need it, you do it as the flowers start to fade. So right now, my pink and blue ones are blooming. So as they start to fade, if they're too large, you take out older canes at the soil line. You don't give them a haircut because they have multiple stems coming from the ground. It's not one trunk that supports the whole thing.
There are 3 great this word messes me up.
It hurts a lot of people.
It's horticulturalist in the state of Arkansas. There's Peon Smith, there's Janet Carson, and then there's
Chris Olson. There's a lot of that. There's not just the 3 of us. There's a lot of
those
great
are 3
horticulturalists.
pretty famous, nationally famous people right here in Arkansas. Are you competitive?
I'm competitive in a lot of things, but I don't compete with Chris or Alan, either one, as far as everybody has their own thing. I was government, I was extension, and I wasn't trying to go national, and I'm still not trying to go national. I mean, I was on national committees and national boards, and I think Arkansas Master Gardeners are known nationally because we've held 2 international events, and I would say there were 2 very successful Master Gardener events. But they have their own venue. In fact, my least favorite thing, which both of them love, is TV. I hate TV. I mean, I've done it for a long, long time, but you spend a lot of time doing even a 30-minute segment. And then if you're not watching it at that minute, now today it's a whole lot different than it was when I started TV. But my very first TV gig was For Your Garden. Do you remember all the 4 years for Channel 4? There was For Your Money, For Your Health, I was Janet Bierman Carson, For Your Garden. And I mean, it was a 30-second segment every Saturday at the 6 o'clock news. And we spent a half a day. I'd have to find the location, do the spot, go back and do the voiceover, and then they would edit it. And back then, if you didn't see it, you didn't see it.
You missed it.
And now they can at least, capture them, and you can go back to the site and you could rewatch it. But back then you couldn't. So it was a lot of work for a small segment, I thought.
And you have your weekly column at the Democrat Gazette, and then you have your blog also. But you also have written a book called In the Garden.
I've actually written 2 books.
Oh, okay.
The first book was, I think, 2010.
Yep.
And my second one was 2016 or 17. The first was In the Garden, and it's just a compilation of some of the columns, and we tried to pick some of the more common Q&As, and then I used to write every month what to do in the garden, and that stopped for a while, but we're doing it again, but a smaller version. So I do a Q&A every week for the Democrat Gazette. And then I also do the first of the month, we do what's called Breaking Ground, and it's what do you do this month in the garden? And
Everybody needs that.
And then I do a feature story once a month.
It's hard to keep up with when to prune what and what to do and when to do it. So you have a way for people to follow your guide in Arkansas?
Well, you can get the book, and it's got every month.
Month to month.
It's month to month what to do in the garden, and then the most common question and answers for that month.
Is that the In the Garden 2010 or the 2016 book?
That's the 2010, In the Garden. The 2016 book is similar, but it's geared just to fruits and vegetables.
In the Garden, I need to tell you this. If you go on Amazon.com, you can buy it for $176.
You can get it a whole lot cheaper at the Democrat Gazette.
Is it a typo on Amazon.com?
I think it's somebody trying to sell their copy of their book, I guess. I don't know.
No, $176 for a paperback?
That's pretty funny. No, you
Okay,
you can buy them from the Democrat Gazette.
Thank you.
They have a Democrat Gazette bookstore that you can go on, and they have them there. I know that some bookstores in town do carry them. I know that Historic Arkansas Museum, the gift store down there, they have the book, both of them. Wordsworth used to. I'm not sure if they still do. The Crown Shop in Little Rock used to have it. So you can get it. In fact, they can tell you where they do have them.
Okay, good. I will put a link. We will do the research. I will put a link on Arkansas Flag and Banners page, too, so that people can find out where to get them. How far do you want your entrepreneurship with Planit? Let me spell that for everybody. P-L-A-N, Plan, it, I-T, Janet, and condense it. Planit, Janet, is it .com?
Well, if you do Planit, I just found this out last night. If you do planetjanet.com on the internet, it directs you to the Democrat Gazette site for Planit Janet. And then you can see the headings of about, and you can sign up to get the emails. Now, it's not like my old blog where if you sign up, every time I do a blog post, it emails you immediately. This comes out once a week. On Mondays, a newsletter comes out from me, and it'll have all the blog posts from that week. It'll also have my column for that week that was in the Saturday paper, if I did a feature story. Now, if you're not a subscriber to the Democrat Gazette, you can't read the columns. I mean, you can just see the headlines. But it doesn't matter if you're a subscriber or not for the blogs. You can read them in their entirety. But there are ads in them, so it's not like my old WordPress blog. It's different.
I have enjoyed having you so much.
It's been fun. It's gone by fast.
I know. I hope you'll come back.